Go ahead.
Giles, it's a really pleasure and an honor to talk to you. But and by the way, I love what you did on Love and Cirque de Soleil. Love. I've seen that show 5 times, and every time I go back to Vegas, I want to see it again.
I probably owe you money.
And you know, and it's the sound. It just so satisfying. But there's a question that, not related to this, but I always wanted to ask your dad if I ever have the chance, and I'm never going to get that, so I'll ask you. But one of the things your dad said, and I think it was in the documentary on George Lennon, on George Harrison. He said one of the biggest regrets was he never encouraged George to write more. And I always thought about what the possibility would be if the Beatles did, some more songs from All Things Must Pass, because there was such a volume of songs there. Do you know anything? I just thought maybe you could comment a little bit more on that aspect of the Beatles and, work involving George Harrison and getting more of those songs in the Beatles.
It's funny because when they started, John and Paul were the main writers, and my dad did slightly ignore George, mainly because a lot of the songs he was writing initially weren't as good as John and Paul's, and he was the A&R guy as well as the record producer, so he was making decisions on hits, as a cold-hearted, and then George started writing brilliant songs, and just when he reached this point where he was writing, songs equally as good as John and Paul. There at a stage, and Michael can tell you this, because he was there. They were trying to keep together as a band, and almost to the extent where John and Paul were kind of teaming up again and trying to please each other to keep the band together. And George would once again be ignored, but for completely different reasons. So he played All Things Must Pass to them during the Let It Be sessions 3 or 4 times, and I have these tapes from when I was doing the Scorsese film of that very thing. The benefit of that is I think that All Things Must Pass is an amazing album, and probably it's probably an amazing album because of that. So good things come out of it.
Yeah, I think quickly that was one of the tensions, I think, which partly led to the breakup, because, as I may have said earlier, George, when he was 14, used to carry the guitar cases while the other ones walked ahead, and they'd formed that bond as older teenagers. And when the early albums, there'd be 10 tracks written by Lennon and McCartney, 1 George Harrison or 2, 1 for Ringo, and I think George was feeling financially slightly overlooked, but also very much artistically. And he knew what was inside him. And he knew, well, very shortly thereafter, as he started to write his own great songs. But I think that was, as Giles said, I think the other 2 were always older, and both were kind of bullies. I mean, it was a family. They were the older brothers. And so I think that led partly to what happened.